I think we're going to get underway. We have a really exciting program today, so we're going to get underway right away. And with our music, Rick Fairbrook. That would mean.
All right. Today we're going to, I've got my teleprompter here, so that's what I'm doing here. Today you will see and hear a performance of a poem put to music. In 1893, Catherine Lee Bates, a poet and Wellesley College graduate, or not graduate, a professor, had recovered from a bout of suicidal depression. Soon after that episode, she was given the opportunity to go to the summit of Pikes Peak. From there, she viewed the beautiful mountains, the plains below, and that inspired her to write an 8-verse poem that was later matched with music and eventually becoming what many have described as our national hymn. It is a song we have frequently sung here at Rotary to open our meetings, and usually just the first verse. And it has been described as a song of aspiration about what our country can be and do. I'd like to read the 2nd through 4th verses. There are a total of 8, but the first 4 I think are the most familiar, and we're going to hear the first today. Oh, beautiful for pilgrim feet, whose stern impassioned stress a thoroughfare for freedom beat across the wilderness. America, America, God mend thine every flaw. Confirm thy soul in self-control, thy liberty in law. Oh, beautiful for heroes proved in liberating strife, who more than self their country loved, and mercy more than life. America, America, may God thy gold refine, till all success be nobleness, and every gain divine. Oh, beautiful for patriot dream that sees beyond the years thine alabaster cities gleam, undimmed by human tears. America, America, God shed his grace on thee and crown thy good with brotherhood from sea to shining sea. I hope you'll enjoy America the Beautiful by a military jazz group.
I think you can feel free to sit if you'd like, and then we'll stand again for the invocation.
Oh, beautiful for spacious sky, for amber waves of grain, for purple mountains, and their majesties above the fruited plain. Yeah, talking about America, America, God shed his grace on thee and crowned thy good with brotherhood from sea to shining sea. Sing along one time. America. Oh,
Aren't you glad I taught him everything he knows? For our invocation, David Length.
Thank you, John. So David Foster Wallace gave a commencement speech in 2005 to the graduating class at Kenyon College that began this way. There are these two young fish swimming along, and they happen to meet an older fish swimming the other way, who nods at them and says, "Morning, boys, how's the water?" And the two young fish swim on for a bit, and then eventually one of them looks over at the other and says, "What the hell is water?" The point of this fish story is merely that the most obvious, important realities are often the ones that we're hardest to see and talk about. Everything has to do with simple awareness of what is so real and essential, so hidden in plain sight all around us all the time, that we have to keep reminding ourselves over and over, this is water, this is water. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Please be seated. We have quite a few guests today, which is a testament to our speaker. Today with proposed new member Rachel Avery and Stephanie Smith, who are supposed to be here, but I think they're not, but they will be coming as proposed new members. Guests of Bunker Frank are Larry Frank and Ed and Marianne Kershaw. Guests of myself are Virginia Hislop and Joe Miles. W.D. Frank guest of his guest is Lori Mosier. Casey Corr has brought Sally Tonkin. Carmen Mendez, Jason Kildall. John Cooper has brought Andrew Holt, another prospective new member. Dennis Richardson and his wife are here with Michael and Kay Richardson. And then Selma Umbarger is the guest of Virg Umbarger, and Patrick Bradford is a guest of Corey Gibson. So if you'd all welcome our guests. A couple very quick announcements. One is just to remind you, some of you are on the Environment Committee, have probably heard that we are doing a neighborhood cleanup this Saturday. You meet at 7:45 at Arling Street by the Yakima Valley College. Bob Udell will be your leader, but there will be groups from the other Rotary clubs, as well as some of the others. If you have time and are able to do this, I don't think it will take a huge amount of time, but it would be great to have the help. The quicker it'll do. Within the next announcement is within the next few days, Carolyn will be sending out information about our fair day in 2 weeks. As I announced the last time, because of the closeness of that room and the way everything is kind of working out right now, your fair tickets you can have by simply, Carolyn will send out an email, just sign up, and she hopefully will have some for you next week. If not, we'll get them to you. You'll be able to go then anytime that day, and we'll call it the Rotary Fair Day. There won't be a meeting that day. Your meeting will be at the fairgrounds. So just send that in. There will be no charge if you have already paid for your meal. That meal charge will be basically your ticket charge. So there's no additional charge for that. If you didn't, then of course there will be a charge. One other quick thing that because it is September 16th, and today is, I think most of you know, Mexican Independence Day. And normally we have had a kind of a Hispanic heritage program, but this year we decided to kind of do some stories about the Mexican immigration and the Mexican traditions throughout the next month, through Latino Heritage Month. So today, basically, I'm just announcing that today is the anniversary of the day that Mexico declared independence from Spain in 1810. No, I was not there, but it did happen in 1810. And we'll be hearing some other things about the waves of immigration into this valley. There were 4 basic waves. We've had Mexican Latino residents of the Yakima Valley since long before World War II. It's not just, even though there's been an influx, larger influx in recent years, there has been a Latino culture here in the valley for a long time. And we'll be hearing some more about that over the next few weeks. And now, with some quick announcements about some things upcoming, membership development with Austin Beebe, who is somewhere right behind me. Okay.
First, I just want to get a quick visual of who here is a guest today. Raise your hand. Look at that. I think every table has a guest or couple. So thank you all for coming. I want to keep up the guest membership. I want to try and get some new members. Luckily, in the last month, we've had about 7 people reach out to us independently and want to join or be a part of our Rotary. So we are getting back into the swing of things. I really appreciate that. Anytime you see a new face, make sure that you go up and introduce yourselves, even if all you can see is their eyebrows and their eyes. Make sure and wave or fist bump or however you want to greet them, but make sure that they feel welcomed and introduce yourself. I do want to remind you that Wednesday, October 6th, from 5 to 7 p.m. at the Kiln, we're having refreshments with Rotary and Rover. So raise your hand if you like beer. Raise your hand if you like pizza. Raise your hand if you like dogs. All right, put your hand down if you don't like people. Okay, good. So everyone should be there. A reminder, Wednesday, October 6th, 5 to 7 at the Kiln. Bring your dog, bring your family, bring your friends, whoever you want to be involved. It's going to be a very informal, just Rotary meet and greet. So we can get to meet some of these new Rotarians or potential Rotarians and introduce them to the club and the new members. So hope to see you all there. Thank you.
Thank you, Austin. And this would not be a complete meeting and certainly not dealing with membership if I didn't offer the blue badge to Trevor Green again. Someday he will be here at the same time I remember. So we'll get the two together. Going on, now we have Quinn Dolan with Operation Harvest.
Thank you, President John. Fellow Rotarians, just a reminder, Operation Harvest is coming up. It's like mostly 2 weeks away, which is what my brain is telling me. Maybe a little bit longer, but sign up. The green sheet is on your table. As you can see, these are the people who've already signed up on the back. Good job. Thank you. Gold stars for all of you. There's no, I got an email from Southwest Rotary and they said we're working on 100% club participation. And I thought, oh, we could do that too, because you can donate money. You can put a yard sign in your yard. You don't have to actually go out and pick up bags. So I encourage you to find one thing you can do and sign up. And here's what I'll also tell you. Sign up today if you want to route, because Carolyn and I and the team is going to be working on a signing. And you can see we need 100 people on code 9. We have 15 signed up. We need 100 people on code 10. We have 30 signed up, and we need 50 on code 11. We have 7 signed up. And so we're bringing in other groups, but obviously this is a Rotary event. So before I offer it to the Wazoo nurses that Rob Vickers knows and the Junior League who wants to participate with us and Kiwanis members, I want you all to have your first dibs. You can't have that if you wait till the last minute. So sign up, let me know how you're going to participate, and we'll be in touch. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Remember, we are challenged because we have to beat Jennifer's amazing total last year. So we want to do better than that this year. So Sergeant at Arms, Sonia.
Hello, it's really good to see all of you. Am I doing this right? Can you hear me? Okay, thanks. I have never been Sergeant of Arms before. I've been on many committees, but I've never done Sergeant of Arms, Sergeant at Arms, I found out. So I did a little research. Did you know this term was used in England as early as 1189? The Sergeant at Arms was a personal attendant to the king. They stood by with weapon ready to oust anyone who may be treasonous or cause problems or disagree with the king. John, you see any rabble rousers out here that I need to oust? You just let me know. Okay. So we're going to see how much the rest of you know about agents. Have you done your research? Let's start out with Connie Phelan's table. Now, the way I'm going to do this, I'm going to call on a table and hopefully they get it right. But it's the 4-way test. Did you know the answer? If you didn't know the answer, you have the right to donate your dollars, and guests, you do not have to donate your dollars. This is a member-only collection. Okay, Connie Phelan's table. Can you tell me what the senior most enlisted rank in the Army is called? Anybody? Yell it out. Close. Sergeant Major. Okay, Eric Silver's table. Who is the Sergeant Major of King John's Sergeant at Arms platoon this year? Who's in charge of the Sergeant of Arms this year? It wrote it. Ah. You guys just might as well get your wallets out because it's John Cooper. He's our fearless leader. Daryl Blue's table. Can you name a famous and widely and decorated World War I hero who was played by Gary Cooper in a movie? York, correct. Nobody has to pay. Okay, how about Felix Rifa's table back there? Who was Gomer Pyle? Who was Gomer Pyle's boss? Gomer Pyle, USMC. Nobody watched that? Sergeant Carter, that's right. Okay, we're gonna go for Chuck Stillwagon's table down here. The driving force in creating the Peace Corps. What sergeant was the driving force in the Peace Corps? Correct. I heard somebody say it. Our Sergeant Shriver. That's a tongue twister for me. Greg Luring's table. I see you back there, Greg. What drill sergeant was played by actor Warren Oates in the movie Stripes? Sergeant Holka. We are going to go for Jim DeGrasse's table. Jimmy, do you know the stage name of a professional wrestler whose real name is Robert Rudolph Remus? No. Close. Close. His wrestling name was Sergeant Slaughter. Okay. John Cooper, in your table, even though you're not there, what Beatles album was released in 1967? Woohoo! That, my folks, that is all I know about sergeants. So if you can pay your $1.
Okay, I promised WD that he'd have at least a half an hour for his program. He's going to have more, but we're going to have to take a quick little pause a minute because we're going to, because of our technology situation, we have to move a laptop up here so that we can advance his slides from here rather than down there. And then he will be introduced by none other than Sergeant Craig Gilbert. Yeah.
President John and fellow Rotarians, it gives me great pleasure today to introduce to you a friend of mine, William D. Frank, better known as WD. WD is a native of Yakima, and we went through Roosevelt, Franklin Junior High, and Eisenhower, and then he got too smart and he went off to Stanford. He attributed it getting into Stanford from working in his family's orchards. He learned all kinds of physics and classics there. He ended up majoring in classics. We did some climbing together in Boy Scout Troop Number 9. He grew to really love the outdoors and competed in cross-country skiing, I think at Stanford too, and no, afterwards. And then advanced from there to the biathlon. Which is both cross-country skiing and shooting with a rifle, a target. He eventually, after college, he trained in biathlon and was actually at the Olympic trials in 1980 and 83.
for the U.S. Olympic biathlon team. He was just an aside. He was also a great skier, and he actually was one of the first, or the first person to ski down the Adams Ice Fall. First person. Never gone up Mount Adams on the north side. It's crazy. It's William D. Frank earned his PhD in history at the University of Washington and taught history and humanities at Central Washington University. Besides authoring the two history books that you read about in your tutor, which are about Finnish and Russian ski and mountain troops, he's now going to talk about a new book that's coming out. But he's also the inspiration and the chief architect of the Central Washington Mountaineering exhibition that's about to open at the Yakima Museum. So be sure to get to see that. So everyone, please welcome Debbie D. Frank.
Actually have known each other since kindergarten, up where the plaid door is now. Probably one of the first people I met, other than my brother and Ginger Hislop sitting over at this table. Today, yes, I'm going to talk to you about my new book, about Kay Kershaw, Isabel Lynn, and the Double K Ranch. It's coming out I think next year, from University of Alabama Press. And up on the screen, you'll see some, thank you. Yeah, yep. Up on the screen here, you'll see some of the entities locally that helped me find archival material in the last year during the COVID lockdown. And I cannot thank them enough for helping me find all this wonderful background information, and I want to acknowledge them right from the start. Now, today I'm going to talk to you about this remarkable relationship that developed between Kay Kershaw and William O. Douglas. And in my book, you're going to read about some amazing trips to the mountains, publishing ventures, Yakima history, the colorful characters that many of us knew from around here. But that's not what I'm going to talk about today. I want to talk about something that is the driving force behind my book. And it's going to take a little explaining. But what's going to help you understand it when I get to it is if you think about your favorite chair. And I know it's not the ones that you're sitting in here at the convention center, okay? But think about the chair that you would describe to me that you love the most while you listen to a few details about Kay's early life. Now, as many of you know, William O. Douglas wrote his first book for general consumption for the general public in 1950, or it was published in 1950, of Men and Mountains. And it deals with Yakima and the mountains that sit beyond us, just beyond us here to the west. And he really wanted to have the book release party in Yakima. So in 1950, in April, up at the Commercial Hotel just up the street, the Yakima Chamber of Commerce arranged this gala event. Now, at this event were a lot of the people that he talks about in the book. And a couple of them are pictured here. Doug Corcoran and Elon Gilbert leaving the Yakima airport with William O. On their way to the event. Now, I put this up on the screen because it's a remarkable picture, because all three of these men have buildings that we still associate with them located in Yakima. I'm talking about the William O. Douglas Federal Building up by the Capitol, the newly named Doug Corcoran Building over on Lincoln, and of course the Warehouse Theater and Allied Arts Center that used to stand in Gilbert Park till just a few years ago. But on the stage with Corcoran and Douglas and Gilbert that night was another individual, and She also is associated with the building that's still standing today, thanks to our firefighters up on the Schneider Spring Complex. At least it was still standing this morning. That's Kay Kershaw. And the building is the Double K Ranch. Now, I'm going to let William O. do the introduction for you, just as he did in 1950.
Thank you, Doug. I want Kay Kershaw to stand up.
Ken Colton had just spoken, so Kay stand.
Kay needs no introduction. Kay has a lot of attributes and achievements, qualities that perhaps some of you don't know about. Kay can roll a cigarette in one hand. And I bet you that they're not 1/10 of 1% of the members of the Chamber of Commerce of Yakima who do that. And Kay can throw a diamond hitch, and she's taken Elon and me back on some wonderful trips. And I'd like to take this as an opportunity to say that I think it's mighty fine that the country has a place like the Double K Ranch where people from all parts of the country can come and sleep and get good lodging, wonderful entertainment, horses, and the scenic views that they get from the American Ridge. And I hope that, as some wag said today, that when he saw the map in the front of the book showing Double K Ranch, that I did help have a little share in putting Double K on the map. Thank you, Kay, for coming.
So William O. had more than just a little bit of a hand in making the Double K famous. And we're going to get to that in a minute. But one thing that he says that's really interesting in his introduction is that Kay needs no introduction. And this was true for this audience up at the Commercial Hotel in 1950. Kay was born in the Valley. She grew up in the Valley. And she was a very well-known personality. She got a lot of press. So these people knew her well. Oh, and she was a member of the Yakima Valley Chamber of Commerce as well. Now, Kay was known around the state as a very accomplished equestrian. She was known locally as an athlete across a wide variety of activities, at all of which she excelled. She was known for She is on a variety of climbs, some with the Cascadians in the 1920s. And she was a very accomplished skier. She was on the forefront of the ski industry in the state of Washington in the 30s and the 40s. But the thing for which she was known perhaps the best, and especially by this crowd, was as a pilot. Now, in 1927, when Charles Lindbergh flew the Spirit of St. Louis from New York to Paris, the United States was gripped with aviation frenzy. And if you look at the newspapers from that time, every day there are articles, pages of stories about flying. And this struck Kay hard. In early 1928, she decided that she was going to become a pilot. And so she started taking lessons from Maurice McMechen, who had a flight school here in Yakima in the spring. McMechen was the more seasoned pilot at the time than Charlie McAllister, who we know better. And by the end of the summer, Kay had gotten her pilot's license, the first woman in Yakima to get a pilot's license. And this picture is from the dedication of the Yakima Airport in July of 1928 with a group of other aviation enthusiasts. Now, Kay worked for her father on the Kershaw ranches out by Glebe. The family lore tells me that Kay was interested in agriculture as long as she got to use teams of horses. But as soon as gas-powered tractors replaced draft animals on the farms in the 1930s, she lost interest. She went to work for the Washington State Departments of Social Services in the midst of the Depression, starting in Yakima. Then she moved to Chelan. Then she took a supervisor's job down in Walla Walla, where she met a woman named Pat Kane, and we'll get to her in a minute. Kay and Pat moved to Seattle, and Kay was working for the King County Welfare Department in the early 1940s. In 1942, Kay volunteered to go overseas with the Red Cross to help rehabilitate wounded soldiers in Egypt. So she did some training on the East Coast, and in the spring of 1943, she deployed to North Africa and started leading horseback trips for these wounded soldiers. But the deployment didn't last long. She suffered a debilitating injury and hurting her back, which being thrown from a horse. And she spent several months in hospital in Alexandria, Egypt, then at Walter Reed Hospital in Washington, D.C., before returning home to recuperate with her parents in Glebe. Now, in the late 1930s, Kay had this idea that she wanted to start a dude ranch up in Goose Prairie. Now, the dude ranch industry was on its ascendancy in the first part of the 20th century. There were a lot of wealthy people east of the Mississippi River who wanted to come out west and ride horses and eat baked beans and play at being cowboys. So hundreds of these dude ranches sprung up in Wyoming and Montana and California, Nevada. And Kay thought that she smelled a business opportunity in the Pacific Northwest at Goose Prairie. As a young girl, she had been riding horses and then later doing horse packing trips out of the family cabin at Cliffdale. And she knew the terrain between the Goat Rocks Wilderness area and Mount Rainier like the back of her hand. And she knew that this would be the ideal place to lead horse packing trips. So with her partner, Pat Kane, she started working on this double K venture in the early 40s. Now, timber rationing during the war put a stop to any kind of construction. But by 1946, all the buildings were complete, and Kay and Pat hung out their double K shingle, 1K for Kershaw, 1K for Kane, in January of 1947. Now, their plan was to run as a ski area in the winter, and then have a dude ranch in the summer so that they could attract clientele the whole year round. Well, the winter part never really worked out, but the dude ranch did. And backed by the Kershaw family, and in no small part because of this association with William O. Douglas, the business grew, and they were starting to attract a lot of clientele from the East Coast and from Europe and from all around the world. William O. Douglas, by the mid-1950s, was this well-known personality. He was writing lots of books now about his travels around the world, and people knew him. He was getting to be really famous. Now, he spent a lot of time at the Double K, and he became really good friends with Kay. They admired each other very much. William O. came to the Double K Ranch for the first time in June 1948 with Elon Gilbert, his longtime pal, and a few other members of the Gilbert family. And this was the start of this association of William O. with the Double K Ranch. And he spent a lot of time there. He would come back and spent during the summer when court wasn't in session, and book a week or two here with Kay until the mid-60s, when he built his own summer retreat up in Goose Prairie, only a stone's throw away from the Double K Ranch. And he was over there all the time, usually at cocktail hour. Now, he got to know Kay and her partners very well. Kay was a lesbian who was in 2 long-term relationships. The first one was with Pat Kane. And she and Pat lived together and worked at the Double K from 1935 to 1954. In Washington, D.C. in 1952, Isabel Lynn, who was working for the Red Cross, got a copy of William O. Douglas's book of Men and Mountains, and she read it. And she was taken by his prose, and she decided she wanted to come out west and see what Douglas was talking about. So she booked a week at the Double K. She was an expert horsewoman herself. And by the end of the week, she'd fallen in love with the Cascades. She'd fallen in love with Goose Prairie. And she'd fallen in love with Kay Kershaw. And the feeling was mutual. So in 1953, Isabel left Washington, D.C. She moved to Seattle and eventually to Yakima. And she was spending a lot of time with Pat and Kay at the Double K Ranch. In 1954, Pat Kane decided that she was leaving the business and leaving Goose Prairie. And we don't know the reason exactly why, but I can imagine that she no longer wanted to be a part of this love triangle. And once Pat left, Isabel moved up to Goose Prairie to live with Kay. And they were in a long-term, devoted, committed relationship to their deaths within just a few months apart in 1996. Now, you can imagine that in the mid-20th century, living in Eastern Washington as a same-sex couple in Yakima County's perhaps most conservative corner was a fraught proposition. In the United States, in the middle of the century, in every state of the Union, there were sodomy laws that made any sex act between same-sex partners a felony. You could be criminally prosecuted and sent to jail. So Kay and her partners were very circumspect about with whom they shared their intimate life. So they put on a front that they were elderly women who had missed the matrimonial train leaving the station, and they were living together as spinsters for economic reasons and safety reasons up at Goose Prairie running a dude ranch. But for those who knew them well, this relationship was no secret. And one of these intimate friends was William O. Douglas, and he very much admired their relationship, probably because his own romantic relationships were a total disaster. But theirs wasn't. It was a beautiful example of 2 people living together. And this affected him personally, and it affected his outlook on the law. Now, this is where we get to the very kernel of why I wrote the book, because it's reflected, this relationship is reflected in Douglas's view of the law, and it's reflected best of all in an opinion he wrote for the court in 1965, Griswold versus Connecticut. And in Griswold, the court determined that the Bill of Rights guarantees the right to privacy for married couples. This decision hinged on a Connecticut law that was on the books since 1879 that made the distribution or the use of any form of contraception illegal. And this decision by the Bill of Rights said that the married couple has the right to use that in the privacy of their own home. Now, Justice Douglas used one of his favorite metaphors when he wrote this decision, the penumbra. Now, the association of penumbra to the law pre-existed Douglas's time on the court, but he is its most eloquent advocate. Between 1941 and 1965, when Douglas wrote this decision in Griswold, he had used the penumbra metaphor in 8 different decisions and dissents. But it's in Griswold we really get to see what he meant when he used this penumbra. So before we get to that, we need to know what a penumbra is. What does the word mean? Okay, well, I'm going to go through this quick, but we need to get into the Wayback Machine and go to ancient Athens, about 375. And in ancient Athens, there's a Greek philosopher named Plato. He writes a book, very famous, that he called the Politeia. In the Politeia, he uses a word, skia, for shadows on the wall. More about that in a minute. Jump ahead in the Wayback Machine to the 1st century BCE, where Cicero, who was very much influenced by this Politeia book, translated it into Latin. He called it res publica. That's where we get the word republic. To translate the word for shadow, he used the Latin word umbra. Jump ahead to the 17th century, we meet a European astronomer, Johannes Kepler. He is observing partial eclipses, and he notices that when a celestial body gets between the sun and the earth, there's a shadow and there are side shadows, and he coins a new term, penumbra, for these partial shadows. Jump ahead to the 19th century, it gets into legal terminology to explain aspects of the law that are not explicitly stated in the law, but that can be implied from the law. They exist on the periphery of the law, the penumbra. Now, I can't overemphasize the importance of this guy Plato and his famous book, The Republic, on the Age of Enlightenment, which was the time period when the founding fathers were developing their political theories. And it had a tremendous effect on one James Madison, who was the principal author of the Federalist Papers, the US Constitution, and the first 10 amendments to the Constitution, the Bill of Rights. Now, in the Republic, Plato talks about the ideal state, and he argues that the ideal state has to work hand in glove with the concept of justice. The state is the visible embodiment of justice in society. And we can see how the framers and Madison put this right into the Constitution, where they say, we, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, not the perfect union, a more perfect union, one that is approaching the ideal state that Plato writes about. And to do that, we have to establish justice. Now, how are you going to do that? Well, Plato's teacher, Socrates, engaged his students in dialogues, the Socratic dialogue. And he asked them to use his technique, listen to his technique, to help define the ideal state. But to do that, we need to know what justice is. Are you guys confused yet? His students were. So to help, Socrates came up with a little story, the Allegory of the Cave. Oh, this will clear it all up for you. I'll go through it quick. Socrates tells us that we are, as humanity, chained to a wall in a dark cave. And all we can see because of our chains are shadows on the wall that we think are reality, but these are really illusions. And what we need to do as philosophers is break these chains, our beliefs, our religions, our perceptions, the way we see the world, and walk around behind the wall where we will glimpse reality and the fire behind reality casting the shadows on the wall. And if you are going to be the philosopher kings who administer the ideal state, you need to climb up out of the cave into the sun where truth behind reality, a matrix of eternal forms, will reveal how reality is formed down in the cave and is creating these illusions on the wall. Do you follow me now? Well, it's a lot like the movie The Matrix. Or it's a lot like investing in Bitcoin. But we're here to, Morpheus and I are here to help. Remember, I asked you to think about your chair. Have you got the picture of your favorite chair in your head? Because Socrates' students are as confused as you are at this point. So he breaks it down into a kindergarten question. What is a chair? Okay, well, his students go around the room, or go around the circle, and they explain what a chair is. And Socrates, through his Socratic dialogue, helps them understand that it doesn't matter how you describe a chair. If it has long legs or short legs, or a back or no back, or arms or no back, they have an essence that's eternal, that's common. It makes it a chair, gives it, as one of my professors told me once, chairness. And this chairness, it doesn't have to be the chair you're sitting in. The idea can exist in your mind. But it's going to be different for Socrates and Plato in the 4th century BCE than it's going to be for James Madison at the end of the 18th century. He is going to have a different idea of what a chair looks like. So if we use Madison as our example, and in 1791, he's going, what is a chair? Well, he'll get a picture in his head of an ideal chair. He'll make a blueprint of that chair. And a carpenter can take that blueprint and make a chair that reflects what Madison thought a chair was in the late 18th or the early 19th century. But what he understood was that chair was different for Socrates, and it's different for him. And this is the beauty of the Constitution, it's going to be different in the future. He couldn't predict what chairs were going to look like in the 20th century when you have the invention of an airplane that needs a different kind of chair, or at the end of the century, a computer takes a different kind of chair. In our 21st century, virtual reality, a completely different kind of chair. But it doesn't matter if the chair was built in 4th century BCE or 18th, 19th, 20th, 21st century, they have something in common, chairness. So, still using Madison as our example, contemplating Socrates' question, what is justice? He and the framers come up with the Bill of Rights, Amendments 1 through 10. Out of that blueprint, there are guarantees that reflect what justice looked like to the framers, which meant that justice worked if you were white, male, Christian, or a landowner. But for those who were contemplating Socrates' question after the Civil War and the emancipation of the slaves, what is justice? They determined that there needed to be another amendment, the 14th Amendment, which stated that every citizen of the United States is afforded due process and equal protection under the law. And when you apply that to the first 10 amendments, then in the penumbra, you see all the rights that are afforded to every citizen, no matter what they look like, what they believe, what their gender identity is, who they love. Everyone is afforded due process and equal protection under the law. So when Justice Douglas is thinking about Socrates' question in 1965, he looks at amendments 1, 3, 4, 5, and 9, and he shines those through the due process and equal protection clause, applies it against that Connecticut law outlawing contraception. In the penumbra, the court determines that there is a right to privacy upon which the government cannot, must not, will not intrude. Now, in 1966, when legal theorists in San Francisco, who were members of the gay and lesbian community, considered this Griswold versus Connecticut decision, they knew that this was going to be the key piece of law that was going to help them overturn sodomy laws that still existed in the United States that made their lifestyle a felony. And they predicted it would take 30 to 40 years to do that with legal challenges. And they had it about right. Now, when Justice Douglas died in January of 1980, the Yakima Herald Republic summed up his 35 plus years on the bench by saying his legal output was vast, which it was. He wrote more decisions, opinions, dissents, articles, speeches, Playboy articles than any other justice before or since. But they said many of his opinions, or none of his many opinions, have achieved the status of landmarks. And it only took about 20 odd years for that to be turned on its head. When Anthony Kennedy cited the right to privacy that Douglas had written, and even used his penumbra metaphor in Lawrence v. Texas, which overturned state sodomy laws in that state, and thus in all states as unconstitutional. And he cited it again in Obergefell versus Hodges in 2015, where the court determined that the Bill of Rights guarantees the right to marriage to same-sex couples. Now, to me, this is the critical element, the critical reason that this relationship was so important. This relationship that developed between Kay and William O. and Isabel right up here at Goose Prairie. They had no idea, of course, that this relationship and his perception of it was going to have such a profound effect in the 21st century. But it has. And it has affected the way we look at constitutional law and the way we look at the rights of every individual in the United States. And I think this is something every resident of Yakima should be proud of. Now, one last thing. In just a couple of weeks, the Supreme Court takes up its new docket, and they are going to be considering a Mississippi case, Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health Organization, and they are going to be revisiting Roe versus Wade. Now, Douglas was still on the bench when Roe v. Wade was decided. When Justice Blackmun wrote his opinion, he cited Douglas's right to privacy precedent in Griswold 11 times. And he even used that penumbra metaphor 3 times. So while you're listening to the news and you're reading about the court in the coming months, just remember, this all started up at Goose Prairie with Kay and Isabel and William O. Thank you very much.
I think you can see what a scholar we have in our midst here. He will be happy to take questions. If you have questions that you might want to ask both about Kay, about legal, anything to do with this, or he will be here after the meeting also. So if not, thank you very much. We appreciate it. Again, one of the things we're doing this year is in your name for every speaker, we're giving a book, a team book on that deals with issues that speak to diversity, equity, and injustice, or in ways in which this is an African teen who used his library to figure out how to solve an agricultural problem in Africa and bring electricity so they could pump water. It's called The Boy Who Harnessed the Wind. And many of these books are mentioned in Rotary Magazine. And these will be given to the various, to the 2 community centers here at the conclusion of our year. So again, thank you very much. Pleased to have been helping on this project, even a minor little way. All right. I think with that, I can't top what he just did. So giving you some little tidbit of local history, I think we'll just pass on that this time. So, and with that, we are adjourned.